Almost every city we go to will do this study right off the bat, and we're finding the same thing almost every place. Even in growing regions, the car traffic is flattening. People are finding other ways to get around, they're moving closer to jobs, the overall burden on the system is just kind of leveled off over time. So that's not the system that was in place that we've been planning for from the 1950s through the 1990s when this 2 or 3% growth was happening every year. Maybe the biggest myth is that we're going to solve the congestion problems. Elected officials will run on this platform, they win on these platforms. I know I know how this works, I'm going to get some action, I'm going to solve this. And this is based on sort of a logical idea that if those horizontal lines represent the capacity of a street, and our models say that the traffic is going to exceed the capacity, we should be able to widen the road. It should be good, but we get this thing called induced traffic. Induced traffic just means that a road that had this capacity when we modeled it, we widened it and say it should work now, but the developers that are along that road, at the end of that road, aren't stupid. They know we've just given them this free capacity that makes their land more valuable. They build more stuff than we anticipated, more cars came than we modeled, and we get this cycle over and over and over again. This is, it's the if you build it, they will come theory. Putting the roads down will draw the cars. This is not news, this is not controversial. Caltrans has acknowledged that induced travel exists, and in fact, they're requiring in future projects that it be modeled. The idea of solving congestion, there is one city that's solved congestion. You tell people in a growing and thriving city you can't solve congestion, you can only manage it. The city that solved it is Detroit. Everybody moved away, there's no congestion anymore, problem solved. Probably not what we want to do here. Another myth is that freeways are an efficient means of moving people around. We saw how well the first few freeways moved cars, how quickly they moved cars. We planned this nationwide system and built it out. But I think all of us know this product breaks twice a day at the time when you really need it the most. That any other consumer product that had this track record probably wouldn't be bought by very many people. But more than any other part of the system, this is what this thing looks like twice a day for a couple hours. So, depending if it's 10 at night, it probably is pretty efficient to get from A to B, but at the times when people need it the most, it's not a particularly good way to get around. There was a study done a few years ago of the US cities that had built the most freeway miles compared to the cities that had built relatively fewer freeway miles. And the cities that had built the most freeway miles were more congested than the cities that had spent less money building freeways. So again, probably not a good use of money in those cities that had really gone after the freeway building paradigm. This is what works better in cities, building networks of streets. What doesn't work about the diagram on the left, where you get the 6-lane road and 4-lane road coming together, is the intersection. We've all been in those intersections with that many lanes at the peak hour, and just sit and sit and sit at that intersection. You have no choice but to go through that intersection just like every other person. A connected network allows you to make the streets skinnier, and for the same number of lanes, you can actually move more cars. And we've already talked about that the other modes besides cars have a lot of advantages in that more connected network. The way that we engineers measure these things don't particularly get at those goals that Kaiser talked about. So this is what the engineers in San Francisco would have called a level of service A. This is what they would have called level of service F, right out the front door in front of the Embarcadero, in front of the ferry building. An economist would have said exactly the opposite, that this was failing and this was succeeding, but because the one thing we're measuring is how fast the cars are moving, you're going to get results that don't necessarily match the rest of your community's goals. So Kaiser talked about how we always talk about what the other person should do. Planners are good at saying what everyone should do. People should take transit, walk more, drive slowly, ride bikes. We're making those prescriptions about what people should do. If you ask kids what they want to do, I want to ride the train, I want to ride my bike. We did a charrette with some kids and to design some transportation options, and one of them wanted roller skating lanes. So people can be really imaginative about what people should do. But sometimes when presented with those options, they don't necessarily automatically make the choice that we think they should make. That option doesn't look attractive. This is hard to read. This is a GM ad from a few years back, and the sign in front of the bus says creeps and weirdos. And then the ad for the car says, luckily there's an affordable alternative. So, you know, you can play on people's sense of these occasional interactions they have in these environments and understand that there's some understandable reasons why people don't make choices that we think they ought to be making. There's also things that transit does well and transit doesn't do well, just like freeways. Freeways do some things well, like move traffic fast when there's not a lot of traffic. Transit does some things better than others. So in closer, well-networked, denser environments that have a mix of uses, transit works really well. In more spread out, single-use environments, transit doesn't work as well. It's not as effective a solution. If this is the environment we're giving transit users, it's hard to attract those users. Again, if you think about this from a customer service perspective, no one wants to buy that. The only people using that product are people that have to use that product. Transit's really good at getting people from a lot of places to a few places. It's not so good at getting people from a lot of places to a lot of places. So just understanding these fundamentals about how these work can help us plan the solutions that are tailored to a given community. It's not one size fits all. Same goes for bike infrastructure. Will people ride bikes? Well, the question is which people and what kinds of environments are you giving them? You know, this guy will ride the bike no matter what we give him. Okay? If we give him a bike lane, that's great. If we don't, he's going to take the lane. But you know, the rest of these people are a little bit different. I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old. I ride my bike every day to work, but I won't take my 10-year-old out in a 5-foot bike lane. It's just not a comfortable, safe place for me to feel like she's going to be protected. That's true of about 60% of people when they're surveyed in terms of their interest and level of confidence in riding a bike. That spandex guy represents about 1% of the population. About 60% of these concerned but interested. I'd like to get out and ride my bike maybe once a week, but I'm not going to ride next to traffic. I'm definitely not going to ride in a lane of traffic with a car. For that 60%, for the big part of the market, facilities like this make much more sense and add much more value. Some kind of separation. Separation from traffic, actual facilities and trails. Those are things that draw that bigger group, and this bears out in the numbers. Cities that have converted their 5-foot bike lanes to buffered bike lanes see really high percentage jumps in the number of people using those lanes because you're tapping into that bigger market of people that have a different comfort level. So understanding who the people are in South Pasadena, what kinds of facilities they need to make them comfortable can go a long way towards increasing the usage of these kinds of facilities. But sometimes you just need a car, right? Multimodal solutions aren't going to fit for everybody for every trip. So how to make sure that the people that are using the cars are using it in ways that are appropriate for and consistent with what the community wants. Part of this is driving at appropriate speeds. So what makes drivers drive slowly? In terms of engineering, the things that most affect driver speed are horizontal and vertical curvature. So with that road, if you lay that road out, the comfort level of driving along is 45 miles per hour. We know that from an engineering perspective. The curvature dictates that. But if you're in a place that's flat with a grid, that's what, like 100-mile-an-hour design speed. So the horizontal and vertical curvature can only get you so far in a place like South Pasadena. We can set speed limits, but we know people need a lot of incentive to actually obey the speed limits. The signs themselves probably don't mean a whole lot to people. That's not really how most people choose their speeds. So what really happens in terms of people picking speeds is that when you drive, you instantaneously do this risk-reward calculus in your mind. So the risks are that you assess the kind of street that you're on and how your database, what your database says you should do, what the weather is, whether you think there'll be pedestrians or cyclists there. You look at things like trees and buildings, and you just go through your database about how you're supposed to behave. The reward is obviously getting to where you're going as quickly as possible. This is the reason teenagers are bad drivers. They don't have this database of risk in their brain to make the right decision about speed. They just don't understand as instantaneously as more experienced drivers do how to choose speed and what speeds are safe to choose. So the things that affect that risk-reward are the width of lanes, the edge activity, so things like on-street parking, seeing pedestrians or cyclists along, that affects your risk-reward, And vertical elements, the enclosure, how far ahead you can see. So in a wide open suburban place, I can see thousands and thousands of yards ahead of me, and I can feel pretty confident that there's no risk facing me. When you're in a more compact urban environment, you can't see as far ahead. There's buildings and trees and parked cars. I've got to drive more slowly to make sure that nothing bad's going to happen and that I'm not facing risk. Lane width, which seems to most people like the least intuitive of those things, is actually really effective. This is a study they did in Dallas. They were trying to squeeze out space for a bike track, but they wanted to keep the same number of lanes of traffic they had, so they took their 12-foot lanes and squeezed them down to 10-foot lanes to test out this cycle track. And they measured the car speeds before and after, and along this corridor, the cars slowed down 6-7 miles per hour just by having the lanes skinnied up. Same number of lanes, they were just skinnier, and the cars slowed down. So this is actually effective, it works. So that's speed. Then the other thing is having cars go where we'd like them to go, particularly places like single-family neighborhoods that we don't want cars driving in. And this used to be easier than it is now. It used to be that you could give a lot of cues physically for wayfinding, things like state routes and things that people used to follow. Now most of us are listening to our phones, and our phones are telling us to cut through lots of different streets that sometimes communities don't want as many people cutting through. So the tools that we have, things like traffic calming, diversions, probably have to be different kinds of tools if we want to affect the phone apps that are telling people where to go right now. So that's something that with technology is changing a little bit. And I'll talk about some other technology here in a little bit. Parking is one of the things that really critically affects people's travel decisions. The price of parking, the convenience of parking, the perceived availability of parking, these are all things that people take into account when they're deciding whether to make a trip or not, and also the way that they complete that trip. So, and there's a whole basket of parking management solutions, and some are right in different communities, some combinations are right for other communities. It's a very, density and parking are like the two things that you can have a meeting about and just really, you can get a lot of reaction and passion around those two things. So talking about things like parking pricing, talking about things like hours and time management and turnover, these are all things that really need to be tailored, and there isn't a right or wrong solution that applies everywhere. It's something that really requires discussion and tailoring to each community. But it can have a big impact on costs. Parking's expensive. Parking that looks free to the user isn't free. Somebody's paying for the land, somebody's paying for the upkeep of the parking lot or the parking deck. Those parking spaces all cost $30,000 a piece, so a lot of money that's tied up. It takes up a lot of space. If a building that's parked at sort of suburban parking standards will use up about 50% of its gross square footage storing automobiles, space that could have been used for a higher economic purpose or more activity or some of the kinds of things that you want to have happen. So parking is pretty costly in a lot of ways. People not understanding where to park also causes lots of circling. So a lot of the traffic that you see out on streets is people hunting for parking spaces because they don't know exactly where they're going. They're looking for it. It's not clear where they're supposed to go. Places that have good wayfinding systems. Santa Monica, for example, has a great parking app that tells you where the parking is, how much it costs, what the availability is. So before your trip starts or as you're getting there, you can know right where you're going and get right where you're going. It cuts down on a lot of the circling. So there's a lot of technology that can help there. Parking in most places is used really inefficiently. So church parking lots aren't full at the same time as grocery store parking lots, aren't full at the same time as offices, aren't full at the same time as apartments. But if all those spaces are dedicated to those uses, you overbuild your parking massively. So by sharing those, if you can find ways to share them, if your uses are close enough together and you can get the management systems in place to share these things, you can cut your parking load by 30 to 50% and still have enough parking to handle all the needs. That's without cutting down driving trips at all. You can cut 30 to 50% of your parking by being smart about how those spaces are shared. That park once kind of idea also has, again, a lot of impacts on traffic. So if you set your city up like this, where people are going to drive from use to use to use, all those trips are getting back out on that main road again. Whereas if you took those uses and set them up where everybody can park once, walk to what they need, it's more convenient for the people using it, and it's certainly a lot less traffic on the road network. There are a lot of tools in development like unbundling of parking. So if every condo that's sold comes with 2 parking spaces, whether I want 2 parking spaces or not. That often ends up being pretty wasteful. If you separate the costs, that parking space can add 20, 30% to the cost of a residential unit. If you can separate those out and make them a piece that you pay for separately, people will often choose a lot less parking than what you are assuming and would have given them. The way the parking looks can be impactful on a community as well. So surface parking lots aren't the most attractive thing to go by. Parking garages that don't have good design elements or ground floor use can really detract from the community. So parking is really impactful cost-wise, traffic-wise, and aesthetics-wise to a community. This is also another thing that's potentially changing with technology. So we don't exactly know how much parking we're going to need in the future, and there's a risk involved in overbuilding it right now if that demand goes down going forward. So let's talk a little about going forward. What's coming up? What should we be planning for? One thing we should be planning for is the baby boom generation that's already starting to hit the retirement rolls. There's different needs for the generation that they're going to have. This is a map of states and that the percentage of the projected growth in the age of 65 and older going up to 2020. So that's a growing segment of the population. On the other end of things, younger people aren't acting like we did when we were their ages. They're not going out and getting driver's licenses when they're 16. They're saving their money. They're spending that money on other experiences. They're making choices that allow them not to have to put money in a car and insurance and gasoline. It's not clear if that behavior is going to continue going forward, but at least right now the millennials are acting really differently than the Gen Xers and the baby boomers did, and so we should at least consider that. Federal money is not going to be there anymore. It's already not there. The gas tax doesn't cover the highway trust fund anymore, so federal government and states are matching dollars less and less and less. The money that was there to build the whole infrastructure system now doesn't even really maintain the system that we have, so that's a change. And then we've got driverless cars on the horizon. They're sort of here being tested, but the technology's there and it's coming soon. And we don't really know what's going to happen here, and this is really kind of a business adoption question, a business model question in terms of sprawl, pollution, energy consumption. So there's really 3 kinds of ways that this could go. So partial adoption, kind of like electric vehicles are now. It's a good product, but for reasons of cost or convenience, only a few people buy the driverless cars. That's one way it could go, and if that's the way it goes, not too much changes. There'll be a little bit different behavior by a few people, but most of us keep doing the same thing. There could be a ubiquitous ownership. In other words, this product is so good, so affordable, everybody buys one. It's like televisions. It came out after a while, everybody had one. This is probably the scariest model. If you think about having a car that you don't have to drive, there's really no disincentive to living 2 hours away from where you work, because you can work in the car, you can go to and from, you can drive all over the place. There could be lots more traffic, lots more need for parking in different places. Do you hop out of your car at Starbucks and have the car circle a block and jump back in the car when you're up through Starbucks? I mean, there could be a lot more traffic on the streets with these cars driving around with no one in them. So kind of a frightening scenario. I think what most people think is going to happen is something like a subscription or per-use model. In other words, we'll just quit buying cars. GM or Uber or Google or somebody will just build and own the cars, and you'll just pay to use them like you pay to use Uber or pay to use Lyft. They'll come by, you'll hit your app, you'll get in them, you'll use them, and there'll be some pricing structure or subscription around that. Under that model, it's also not completely clear. It seems like there'll be less cars. There will probably be less miles driven because there's some efficiency in the way that those trips can happen. But again, if there's less cars and less driving and there's less demand on the streets, there's also, again, potentially some incentive to sprawl again, because you can carry 3,000 cars in a lane instead of 1,200 cars in a lane because they drive so more closely together. And so do we just incentivize more sprawl because we freed up more road space, or do we have plans in place to recapture that street space as the cars get more efficient? So there's a lot of policy questions to think about in getting ready for this change. So a couple of ideas. How are other places dealing with these kinds of things and reacting to these? So one of these is the idea of complete streets, which South Pasadena is familiar with. This is Greenville, South Carolina in the 1970s. This is the main street that runs right through the center of Greenville, and it's 4 lanes, pretty fast. And downtown Greenville, like a lot of other downtowns, had just emptied out. There was a regional mall out at the edge, so they had really nothing going on downtown. So they felt like they really had nothing to lose, and what they did was they took that 4-lane road and they skinnied it up. So they've got angled parking, they have the bulb outs there, the streetscape, and you can see the little tiny trees there that they planted in 1979. And that's what those little tiny trees look like right now. They've had a tremendous amount of success on their main street. So they've gone from this to this. Full retail storefronts, really active. All the surface parking lots have infilled with buildings. A really great environment that people enjoy spending time in and coming to. And that growth has gone block by block all the way down main streets. As they've streetscaped each block, they've had development along those blocks. There's a river that runs underneath Main Street, and all along that river for blocks behind it, they built this kind of pedestrian bridge. They've had all of this new growth and building a new minor league baseball club. So it's really become the centerpiece of their whole economy, that one little project that they did on Main Street to kind of get their value back. Another idea is putting rights of way to work. So a big percentage of the land that any city owns is in its streets and in public rights of way. And if the main thing that those things are doing is moving cars a couple hours a day, that's not a very effective use of a lot of the land that you own. So this is a state route, a freeway in Chattanooga, Tennessee, that for years they talked about that separation between the river and the downtown, and they wanted some way to recapture it. They finally worked through and did. They had the idea that they were going to skinny that freeway down to a 2-lane street, and 3 years after that drawing, that's actually what they did. That's about a $100 million project between the road project and a big park and green space and riverfront that they developed. They've had about $2 billion in private investment in their downtown. They have all of their festivals and parties along their waterfront, so it's really the focal point and the main asset in their community at this point. There are smaller scale things that you can do to reuse that space or change how that space is used over time. So, taking 1 car parking space and turning it into 10 bike parking spaces, parklets, lots of different ways that you can rethink the way that public space flexes and changes over time or over the years. Another idea is making final connections. So there's really great transit service here in South Pasadena, but for some people that first and last mile getting to the Gold Line, for example, can be the biggest challenge. Finding ways to make it really convenient to make the walk trip or the bike trip or even a shuttle kinds of transit trip, making the environment around the station intuitive, attractive. These are all things that can get people to use the assets that are out there on the ground and make it more effective for the way that they really need to move around and need to use systems. So those are a couple of things that other places are doing. And Kaiser mentioned the Beyond the 710. I know there's a lot of people here that worked on it, that are familiar with it, but a lot of the ideas from that are things that I think this general plan and specific plan can be a start on initiating the South Pasadena piece. So one of the ideas in that Beyond the 710 was the Gold Line extension. That's something that with Measure M is very much real, something that's going to happen. The idea as part of that was Metrolink upgrades, so there could be a lot better service, for example, to the Burbank Airport. There were active transportation ideas with some of the money that potentially would be spent on a 710 freeway, but just a small portion of it were repurposed. There could be safe crossings on a lot of the bigger arterial corridors that are unsafe now. Most of the bike and pedestrian plans for all of the cities in the San Gabriel Valley, including South Pasadena, could be fully completed with just a fraction of those dollars. There could be a bike and pedestrian network through the whole San Gabriel Valley that's as dense as Portland, Oregon's bike and transportation network. So really top shelf, top of the line. Travel demand management, this is something that each of the communities can look at. It's a really effective tool to basically reset people's incentives so they make choices that are more sustainable and help the whole community. Places that have done this have seen huge results. So this is from East LA College, Pasadena City College, Cal State LA, and the kind of vehicle trip reduction that could be seen from providing transit passes for them. And this is based on real experience in Cal State Long Beach when they did transit pass subsidies, the kind of usage they got. It's a really receptive audience, college students, and doing those kinds of things can pull lots of car trips off the system freeing up space for other people that need to use this system. Cities have done it, Boulder, Colorado, Portland. Again, you can see these 50%, 30% drive alone rates falling when these kinds of measures are put in place. So they can be a really effective, much more cost effective than road widenings or adding car capacity. The other big advantage, the other big sort of idea in that beyond the 710 idea, this beyond the 710 was the kind of redevelopment that could happen. So Kaiser said we're not making any new land, we're not making any new streets. There potentially is the opportunity to do that both on the north end in Pasadena and on the south end. One of the ideas here too was to create green boulevards. So this is kind of taking the City of Los Angeles' Great Streets program and applying it to some of the boulevards throughout the San Gabriel Valley. Could we take some of what have turned into these big car-moving roads, recapture the beauty of them, what they were supposed to be as these boulevards, places that are the centers of communities and commercial centers, and think about them as more people-centric places. So could we take something like Huntington and recapture it into being something that really is focused on the community, much like Octavia Boulevard in San Francisco that used to be a freeway and is now an actual place where people walk and spend time and create economic value. So again, lots of ideas in that beyond the 710 that we can sort of set the spark on, I think, as part of this plan, along those same lines, and just kind of taking some of these elements of what we know is flawed about transportation planning over the last 40 or 50 years, what we know other cities are doing, and finding ways that we can create more South Pasadena-centric ways of improving our place and creating value. So I appreciate you guys having me here. Kaiser and I would be happy to have some discussion or answer any questions you might have. Thanks.
Yes.
You had mentioned excuse me, the definition or the different definitions between urban and suburban space, and I wondered if you could say a little more about what distinguishes.
Okay. Sure. So those numbers were actually from a survey by Trulia, the real estate website, and they were just asking people what their perception of their environment was, whether they perceive their environment to be urban or suburban. And so it was hard to see on the map because of the scale, but essentially all of South Pasadena had that blue color. So when they were asking people in South Pasadena what they thought of their community, they were thinking of themselves as urban. I would say more technically, though, what you'd be talking about is connected street networks. Not big, huge super blocks, but well-connected streets. You'd be talking about commercial districts that have buildings that are up to the street rather than set back behind parking lots. In terms of the single-family neighborhoods, you'd also have those connected streets. You'd probably have somewhat smaller lots than you do in more far-flung kind of suburban communities. So, as planners, that's what we would call urban. But in terms of that survey, it was really asking, just general public what they consider their place to be. Sure. Okay. Yes.
I think one thing at South Pasadena might be unique, and some people think we're like Montrose or Sierra Madre. They're stuck in a corner. They don't have to worry about traffic, but we're right in the middle of transit traffic, east and west, north and south. And we don't want a freeway to resolve that problem. So I think, and I like your thing with there's no solution, you want to manage it, because there's always going to be congestion. So I just want to make the point that I think South Pasadena is kind of unique in that way, that you got to move the traffic, and I'm getting like, we don't want a traffic calm Fair Oaks, for instance, or Monterey Road. Those are major arterials. You got to move the traffic. And I think 30 miles an hour is a good speed limit for any arterial in the city. But I don't know how you do that. I mean, today, you look at your 2 hours in the morning and the night. I mean, Fair Oaks is just bumper to bumper from Huntington Drive to the freeway. And I think, that's, I don't know what the solution is, but definitely hopefully there's an improvement possible.
Yeah, the challenge for a community that's literally a crossroads, that's between a lot of places that are attractive and thriving or growing, is that you have absolutely zero control about the demands on your streets. You could cut the development and growth in this city to zero, and it doesn't change things. You could widen Fair Oaks to 10 lanes, and it'll get used up. The only thing you can actually control is what that street looks like and feels like, and how it functions and how you manage it. That is the thing that this city has in its control, because you are at the mercy to a degree of some external influences. And it's a difficult kind of thing to do, to draw a line and say, you know, we're going to do our fair share in terms of moving cars through the system. You know, we're not going to neck Fair Oaks down to 2 lanes and just be a non-participant, but we're not going to do more than our fair share. We're going to let those cars move, but they're going to move on our terms. We're not going to give up all the other amenities that we want of the street. We're not going to give up the safety of the other users of the street who aren't driving. And again, if there's regional pressures to do more than that, but I think successful communities are the ones that can find that right balance that says we're regional players, but we're not, you know, we're kind of not regional patsies. We're gonna keep ourselves a place and maintain the things that are very important to us. It's challenging.
Anybody else? Paul, I have a question. You mentioned some of the disruptive technologies, like the subscription for driverless cars. How can a city like South Pasadena plan for disruptive technology that we may or may not realize? I mean, you know, 10 years ago we were thinking the personal mobility choice is going to be the Segway, and that didn't materialize. So how does South Pasadena plan around that?
So when I'm talking to cities about particularly driverless technology, which is kind of the thing that everybody sees could just change everything, there's kind of 3 big ways that the communities ought to be thinking about them. So one is data. You know, cities 20 years ago were in the position of permitting cell phone towers. And at the time, they were in a position to say, you know, in addition to this, as part of this permit, we want rights to the data that comes from it.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we're buying the data back from Google, right? So the cell phone towers are up. We all have these in our pockets. The actual best real-time transportation information we have comes from Google. They sell it right back to us. You know, everything that you put onto your phone moving around is coming right back to us. So, so these are decisions that might be made at the state level, but we have the opportunity, as we're permitting driverless cars, not to make the same mistake again. You know, Uber and Lyft are the same thing. They're beginning to sell their data back to us as well. So one of the things I would suggest, probably at the state level, but cities are in a position to talk to their state representatives, make sure that we own the data that's coming from these. It's really important in terms of planning our communities. So the data is one piece. The other I mentioned, which is that if everyone's in driverless cars, they are much more space efficient. They platoon more closely, meaning you don't need as many lanes. So you're either going to let those lanes fill back up because more sprawl happens, or you're going to have some targets set that says when driverless car usage gets to X point, we're taking a lane back. And just sort of have those triggers set and in place so that no one's surprised by it, everyone knows it's coming, that it's been planned for in advance. The third big thing is curb space. So if you think about how Uber and Lyft are used right now, it's changed how curb space is being used. These people pulling over to pick you up in random places, and most cities don't have dedicated space for that to happen. Well, if every trip is starting and ending at the curb, or almost every trip, the way the curb space is used is going to be really different. So that's something that probably is going to continue to evolve to a degree regardless of how much driverless technology is deployed. So thinking about how curb space is used for freight, for ride sharing, for driverless technology is something I think is a now kind of question for most communities.
Yep. Thank you. Any other questions?
What do you say to cities, people, communities that say that, okay, thanks, that say that having a freeway connecting point A to point B will actually reduce traffic and kind of collect traffic and take it off their surface streets. And a lot of people actually really believe this, in cities like Alhambra and Monterey Park, that perhaps haven't moved to transit or providing that option as readily as other cities have. But there really is that conviction that somehow a freeway will collect all that. And people even in South Pass still, some people still think that. So how do you answer that?
So I guess I would answer it two ways. One is that I don't understand why this would be the first freeway that accomplishes that. In other words, having looked at all the other freeways that got built and that didn't happen, I'm not sure why this would be the one that does that. But the other reason is that there's a really big fat report written by Caltrans who was really trying really hard to make that case, and it's not particularly convincing that it will actually have those results. It really shows a lot of moving the traffic around more so than taking traffic off the streets. So, I think in this case in particular, there's been a lot of work done that illustrates that it's not a particularly effective use of money.
Mr. Knapp had pointed out that we're in the middle of a crossroads with people trying to get from one side of our town to the other. I've been here 30 years, and the real pleasure of being in this town is how walkable it is. I mean, our car sits out front in the driveway for 2 or 3 days, and if I don't need to go to work, we walk every place we need to go. Right. But what has happened over time is that walkability is being adversely affected. So we find it much harder now than we did years ago to come across Fair Oaks, because the red stop sign saying don't walk, even though there's absolutely no traffic that's interfering with pedestrians kind of crossing. Right. And we've had a crosswalk taken out because it's deemed unsafe because of the vehicle-started traffic. So I'm just kind of commenting that, if we don't try to maintain that sort of walkability, the city actually really loses one of the attractions for a lot of people. And I don't know what the solution to that is. It's just that it's a loss to the community.
You're exactly right. One of the reasons I showed the little series on Michigan Avenue in Chicago, I get that's a different scale than we're talking about here, but it's a big 7-lane road that carries a lot of cars but maintains its walkability, and it's because there are crosswalks every 300 feet. Carrying a lot of cars is not an obstacle to walkability. Fast cars are an obstacle. Lack of safe crossings is an obstacle. So even at a crossroads, you can fight for those elements that keep it safe and comfortable to be a pedestrian, even if you're sort of doing your part regionally and having cars move through the city. A lot of these things we talked about the lane widths and the vertical elements and safe crossings, those are the things that are under the city's control and that can maintain and kind of push back to keep the things that are valuable here.
I have 2 questions. The first is, we receive complaints from, it seems, every neighborhood in our city about the speed of traffic. Will you be looking at ways that we can address that? And the second, as part of your work in the general plan. And the second question is, I know that you're familiar with our traffic patterns as a result of your work on Beyond the 710. Can you give us a preview of some things that you might be suggesting as we prepare the transportation element of the general plan?
So in terms of your first question, the answer is yes. Well, I'm certain we'll absolutely be talking about ways to manage speed, and that's both on the big corridors like Fair Oaks, but also through the neighborhoods that I'm sure are being affected by Waze and the other things that are causing cars to go on routes that weren't ever expected to carry lots of cars, and some percentage of them aren't going to behave well unless we, physically create spaces that cause them to behave correctly. So yes, that's one of the topics. The answer to your second question is, I think the things that we're going to be presenting to you are more detail on the things that I presented tonight. But as Kuiper said, we haven't had discussions with you guys yet to understand which of those things make sense for you and which of them don't. And I know Kaiser doesn't, and we don't ever go in any place with kind of a prescription or a cookie cutter that says, we're the experts and we know how to fix everything. I think what we bring to you are information and facts, ideas from other places and best practices. But you guys are going to have to tell us what the recommendations are, what works for you, and we can help you work through the assessment of, if you go this direction, you can expect these outcomes. But I'm not an expert on what it's like to live in South Pasadena. You guys are an expert on that, and you have to tell us where what's the right trade-off for you and what's the right balance on those things.
Well, I'll just sort of chime in here with my own problem, and it might be an example for others, I don't know. I live on Meridian, near the southern portion of the boundaries between South Pasadena, Los Angeles, and Alhambra. And so Meridian, from Monterey to Kendall, there are no stop signs. There is one crosswalk at Oak so that the children can walk to either the middle school or coming that way, maybe going to the high school. And that's about it. So I have a very long driveway where I park my car, but then when I'm trying to back out on the narrow street, I have to wait at least 10-15 minutes in the morning because the cars are driving by more than 25 miles an hour. And Meridian does twist and turn a little bit, but people don't seem to care. And I think they're cutting across from Monterey to get to Huntington Drive is what I'm thinking is happening. But it's strange to me that all the other streets that parallel this kind of street have every so often stop signs. We don't have any. And so it's just those kinds of things that affect in my neighborhood and some of the people who aren't here tonight on Wolfred or Gillette Crescent or some of the other places. It's a nightmare because I'm so scared I'm either going to, if I park on the street, I'm going to get hit by a car because it's so close, or I'm going to get hit going or coming from my driveway because people are speeding. It's, I bought into it, I understand, but these are just the smaller things besides Monterey, Fair Oaks, and Fremont, which are also, like you said, highly congested during certain peak hours. Anyway, thank you for letting me.
No, I think no.
You don't have any cure for that right now.
But we have a toolkit. So one of the things that we can do is during the meetings just talk about the specific issue you have and the kinds of things again. So people have done things like adding beacons or signals for crossings at certain intervals that not only create safe crossings, they create gaps and breaks in the traffic. So for pulling out of your driveway, you get breaks more than every 15 minutes. Things other communities have done are things like roundabouts that don't let you go any more than 10 or 15 miles an hour around them. And again, these solutions are right for some places, not right for other places, but there's a whole basket of these kinds of things that we can talk about in a given location and figure out if there's some solution or combination of solutions that will improve things.
Yeah, Paul, I had a more general question. You mentioned in one of your slides that Caltrans has finally come around to recognizing the principle of induced demand. Now, induced demand with respect to building freeways has been known, it was first speculated upon by economists and social science in the 1960s. And by 25 years ago, it was fairly well established. There's been about 20 studies on this. And actually, one of the most remarkable one was the Duranton and Turner studies on this, which makes it pretty much irrefutable that induced demand is alive and well. And yet Caltrans only recently has come to suggest that that may be a viable principle. Do you know why that happened? Is it some kind of bureaucratic inertia that they just never wanted to admit to this?
I'll tell you what's a little more frightening is that they're the first or among the first state DOT to acknowledge it. So not only have they been slow, they've been the fastest among the slow. I'm sad to say as an engineer that my profession, everything that we're taught in school is about creative problem solving. And as soon as we get out of school, we go to a DOT or a consulting firm that sticks you in a cubicle and gives you a template until you just start designing roads exactly this way and exactly this method. And you just sort of, all of that problem solving seeps out of your brain over time. And as these people move up into bureaucracy, that ethos, I think, that inertia just stays there. What's really heartening, though, is that I don't know, like the 35 to 40-year-olds who are sort of getting into positions of management at the DOTs now don't have this same mindset. So there is this generational element to it. The people who are kind of coming into positions in cities and state DOTs now aren't getting into these arguments with us about 10-foot lane safety or about induced demand. They're just, sort of acknowledging the things that we've been arguing for 15 years. And now we get to dive down to sort of the next level of arguments, which is nice to not just be arguing the ABCs anymore and getting a little deeper into the alphabet. So, I wish the pace of acknowledgement of obvious facts was a little more rapid, but it is what it is, I suppose.
I think you can summarize it more quickly by just saying it's the conversion from VMT to PMT. That is passenger miles traveled.
Sure.
So if you're more efficient, if you have a shuttle, you get 10 miles per person. Okay, you have really changed the formula. So I say their conversion to induced or latent demand versus VMT transferring over to PMT.
Sure.
I have a question. I have a problem too, Delane. Apparently, they've put our alley behind our house, which is the access to our garages, on one of those phone apps. And how do you get off of one of those phone apps? And they're apparently trying to avoid either the congestion down at the local elementary school or the Pasadena Avenue congestion where the train tracks are crossing, and it's really a mess down there.
That's a street name instead of an alley.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So
Yeah, this
how do you
is
get it off?
it's this is sort of a new thing for us that professionally doing this. So there's a whole slew of kind of traffic calming tools that we've had for a while for neighborhoods that can help in slowing cars. I mean, the apps work off of speed, right? So they're just tracking the speed on everybody's phone and sending everybody on the fastest route. So one of the things that we can try to do is affect the speed of the travel on that corridor, so that
We stand out there?
you could stand out there. And so one of the things that we haven't, I haven't had a lot of experience yet, is working with cities on the information that's getting fed up into the mapping, and whether, for example, reclassifying things down to alleys, what sort of impact that's going to have. The place that we have done that, because it's been an issue for longer, is on truck routing. So for years, commercial truck drivers are supposed to buy routing applications that are specific to trucks and that will route you along truck routes. And so there is an interaction between cities and RICs and the data suppliers that helps keep those updated, and so that the truck route, the trucks that are doing what they're supposed to do and using those. Well, I don't know the question. I don't know the process well enough to know whether there's a similar opportunity. But I think that's one of the things that we're getting a question from a lot of our city clients. One of the things that we're trying to figure out now is there a way of reclassifying the streets that will change how Waze and Google are making those assignments? So I think, we know there's physical solutions potentially, but we're trying to figure out if there are some technological solutions as well.
The other thing, had another question about these driverless cars, and aren't they going to be circling the block trying to find the person or a parking spot or anything like that, or is it much more efficient than that? And also, then who pays the gas when you get one of those cars?
It's just going to be included in the price.
But somebody has to go to the gas station.
Sure.
It's.
Well, they
just drive. They just send it to the gas station.
Well, the likelihood is they're going to be electric by that point. But
okay.
No, the idea is that since these are going to be run by private companies, it's going to cost them money to circulate empty cars. So they're going to try to manage that system with, to balance the number of cars that are empty versus having enough out there to pick up the riders. So, the hope is that the profit incentive for the private companies is going to keep the number out there balanced. One of these, so I'm trying an interesting exercise with you guys. So close your eyes for a second. Picture a driverless car. Picture yourself in that driverless car. Who's in there with you? Anybody? Yeah. A bunch of strangers weren't in there with you? So when you picture this, almost no one pictures themselves in a car full of strangers. So one of the ideas around efficiency is that it's just going to be, you'll just get in there with 5 different people, and the fact is that most people who have enough money probably aren't going to make that choice. Just like most people that take Uber don't take Uber Pool, they take Uber X, so they can be in the car by themselves. So it's just a little interesting thing to think about that.
I have a couple questions about electric cars. We don't have a public electric charging station in town, and I've heard that having an electric charging station at work means you're more than 20 times more likely to have an electric car. So I'm wondering if you have any information about how many electric cars we have in the city, and maybe some of the incentives that the city might be able to tap into to get that public charging station.
So I don't know the answer to the first question. I don't know what the availability of the data on electric cars here and how current that would be. So we can dig into that. But what's that? Current? Yeah, I didn't even see. Good. But in terms of the kinds of steps the city might take and the incentives or the programs that might be available to help that along, that's definitely something we can prepare for and be able to talk about as the process goes along.
There are certainly a number of grants that are available through various regional and state agencies.
The city has looked at it, and I've actually spoken to Edison personnel about it. The problem is that Edison requires critical mass before they will make the investment of providing the electrification to power, and that is, providing the electrification is a significant undertaking, and they want, at this point, their programs are such that they will not do the electrification unless there's, I think, at least 10 charging stations, which the city would have to pay, and we just don't have that money. Now, perhaps if we bundled several different grants, we could get lucky, but that's been the impediment. It is something that the city has looked at for quite some time. But Kaiser, this question is for you. We have a number of different focus groups regarding the topics that have been discussed tonight: walkability, speed in residential areas. If residents were interested in making sure that their concerns are addressed, which would be the appropriate focus groups for them to attend?
The easy answer is all of them, because truly the issue of walkability permeates every aspect, whether it's our active community, whether it's a creative community, whether it's the core. But if people have limited time and they want to attend one meeting, then I would strongly encourage them to attend core, because that's where we will discuss the connection between planning, design, mobility, and resiliency. And that's a good segue. Are there any other questions? Because I don't want to get you out on a decent hour. Okay. I want to thank Paul for an exciting evening, an exciting talk. Thank you. And I want to suggest that we're just getting started. So keep the questions coming. We got started last night, with our Prosperous group, focus group meeting, and we got some interesting and exciting comments, feedback on issues, needs, and concerns that the city has, the residents have. we have a series of other focus group meetings coming up, and I want to share those dates with you. On March 7th, we have Our Natural and Our Healthy and Safe Community meeting. This meeting will be held at the Senior Center at 7 p.m. On March 14th, we'll have two focus group meetings that will meet together, our creative and our active community. They'll meet at the Arroyo Golf Course, again starting at 7 p.m. And then on March 22nd is when the core will meet. This is essentially three focus areas: planning and design, resiliency, and mobility coming together. And that meeting will be at the library community room, starting at 7 p.m. And then we have two other lectures coming up. We're going to hone in a little more in detail on the topic of parking. We have Rich Wilson. I think you've heard him here before, but he will be presenting on some of the ideas around parking. And then Dr. Richard Wilson will be here on April 18th in this very room. And Dr. Richard, his one-liner is, the way we are designing our cities may be killing us. May be killing us. So with that teaser, I'll bid you good night. You had a follow-up question?
You said there were two lectures, and I think you only mentioned one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Rick Wilson's talk is on March 29th, and Dr. Richard Jackson will be here on April 18th. Thank you.
Are the focus groups listed on the website? You can find them?
Thank you. They're all listed on the website. The web address is www.plansouthpasadena, as one word, .org. Okay, good night. Thanks for coming out.